Okay, so good evening again, everybody. My name is Shane O'Hanlon. I'm the project manager on this climate action plan project, working with the city of Whitehorse. I work with Stantec Consulting. I'll let Blake, as representative from the city leading this project, introduce himself.
Hi everyone, my name is Blake Rogers. I'm the program manager for sustainability services with the Parks and Community Development Department. Yeah, we've been working on the climate action plan now for since I guess probably be about October. So this is the second round of engagement that we've just launched last week. The first one was in late January, early February. The purpose tonight is to do a bit of a walkthrough of the draft action plan that's been released last week. So I'll turn it over to Shane to go over the details.
Very much, Blake. Okay. So the agenda for tonight, I want to leave plenty of time for discussion and your questions. So I'm going to move as reasonably fast as I can through the overview portion, but I want to ground you with the work that's been done, where the plan is at now, and then leave it open for discussion. So I'll run through the objectives of tonight's session, some details on the plan itself, the Climate Action Plan, or CAP. So some context, process, as well as the structure that we've now landed on, a document walkthrough, although if you've managed to find the link to this event on Engage Whitehorse, then hopefully you've likely accessed the document itself, which is also on that page. And then we'll talk a little bit about next steps. And then I want to open the floor, might be running a few minutes behind here, but open the floor to questions and any discussion. So that's the agenda for tonight. Are there any questions before we kick things off? If folks want to unmute, it's a small group right now. We expect some others may join, but if you want to unmute or use the raise hand function or drop comments in the chat. It's going. Okay, so for clarity's sake on the objectives of tonight's webinar, so this is to help provide clarity on the actual drivers behind this climate action plan, the function and scope of it, and recognizing this is the first climate action plan for the city. So how much have we bitten off this time? How much are we trying to do with this first plan? We'll be providing an overview of the structure, and this is a walkthrough of the document, and then discussion and ability to answer questions on where we're at now, or if we can't answer them tonight, to flag these things as considerations for revision in the report or follow-up. And then to help direct, for actual input, direct you towards the available channels for such. Okay, so the driver, though, if you're here, you're likely well aware of these things. City of Whitehorse declared a climate emergency in 2019. Climate mitigation and adaptation are critical to the city's strategic priorities set out in the 22 to 24 time period. And having a climate action plan really helps a city to plan, prepare, and respond to extreme weather and climate change, and allows for a resilient community moving forward. An overview of what the Climate Action Plan intends to do. So we have two spheres of consideration when we're considering climate change. We have the mitigation side here on the left of the Venn diagram. So that's really focused on reducing our emissions and aiding in reducing the rate of climate change, so warming. On the other side of the Venn diagram, we have adaptation, and so that is responding to and preparing for the impacts of a changing climate. So this is recognizing, regardless of how much here on the left we mitigate, because we live in a global system, there is a certain amount of change that is inevitable because of the emissions to date. And so adaptation will be required regardless. The degree of which we require will be dependent on how quickly we reduce our emissions. And the overlap here, you can see samples of actions and ideas, is that ideally there are activities that are both help mitigate GHG emissions, greenhouse gas emissions, as well as adapt to changing climate. So you can see those here in the center. And so the purpose of this plan is that it'll be a guide to support the city of Whitehorse and the community to undertake climate actions. From a process and timing perspective, like mentioned, we started this work back in October of last year and then really kicked things off in November, December with understanding where we are at now. Again, recognizing this the first climate action plan from the city. So, taking an understanding of our baseline, where the city is at with emissions, and also helping to identify and recognize that, of course, in the northern community, there are data gaps and considerations there that can be improved upon in future iterations. The first step of measuring so that you can better manage. So the work started with a greenhouse gas emissions inventory and a climate vulnerability assessment to understand, the contributions to climate change, as well as areas of concern for adaptation. In January, then there was city and staff and public launch. So that was the first survey and webinar that some of you may have participated in. And then through the spring until now, there's been climate action planning focused on, okay, if this is where we stand contextually with our emissions and with a changing climate, what do we need to be doing to address that within our community? So now we are at already in May, and wrapping up with this final round of public engagement and additional stakeholder engagement with interested parties, and then this will be taken forward for review by council. I'll touch on that at the end. I do want to really focus on this slide for a moment. So in terms of action planning, this action plan is focused on that, which is actions that are within the city's ability to implement or control. So you can see here the spheres of influence diagram. If we start at the center, you can see when we're talking about corporate operations, we refer to the city as the sense as a corporation. So there are certain things within the business of the city, the corporation, that it's directly responsible for, the vehicles that it purchases for its fleet, the equipment that it uses at certain facilities, whether it be that they're directly purchased or they are operated by the city. Procurement of various supplies, resources, and services by the city, those are all directly within the city's control. The next sphere, which is incredibly impactful to the community, of course, are the services that the city delivers or supports in their delivery. And so that's where the city starts to lose some element of control, because there's an influence here, for example, with roads that are within the city but are the responsibility of territorial or other jurisdictions. Parks and water, waste, these are things that are influenced, of course, by the city, but direct control over them is limited, because they are shared resources with other cities or jurisdictions, or run by or operated by other governments, levels of government. And then in this outer sphere, you have federal, provincial, and territorial systems. So that is for consideration at the federal level. Okay, who are the utility providers? What kind of regulations are they bringing in as it relates to buildings and building code? There's no direct control of, for example, telecom providers by the city of Whitehorse. So considerations there. And just a reminder that in a plan, again, this is about the scope of this climate action plan. A plan doesn't allocate resources. So the purpose of this plan is to plot out a path, and then future work will determine the budgets available. And so to be looking opportunistically at, okay, funding has become available, that'll help prioritize actions or determine a direction. So budgeting follows once this plan is approved by council. So it's an iterative process. The structure of the plan is such that we've taken from the vision in the official community plan. And that has been used kind of as a guiding framework for this. The pillars, there are 7 pillars that support this vision, and these are specific to the climate action plan. Within those pillars, we have goals which take from existing and kind of realignment of some existing goals with a very much a climate change focus. And then what this plan really sought to develop was strategies that will support these pillars and actions that support these strategies. And we'll get into that in a moment when we walk through the plan. Again, just for reference, these are the 7 pillars that we're considering. So emergency management, buildings and infrastructure, transportation, community education and engagement, corporate leadership, natural areas and parks, waste and materials. So platforms for input. Right now we're directing input is being gathered through the Engage Whitehorse platform, which is where you would have found the link for this event. So you're familiar with that. That survey is the best way for the city to consolidate and capture all information. So that's where we'll be documenting input. So if you have specific input that you want to add, please do so through the survey. If you have questions tonight around clarity, that's again the purpose or the objective of tonight's session. The survey does close end of day or midnight Friday, the 31st of May. And yeah, if there are additional comments or follow-up after tonight's webinar, Blake, who introduced himself at the beginning there, represented from the city. Blake Rogers' email address is available here. And this slide deck, along with a recording, will be uploaded to Engage Whitehorse following tonight. So I'm going to do a bit of a walkthrough of the plan, but before I do that, I'll just pause. Are there any questions if you feel like unmuting or raising your hand so we can go through any comments, or if you want to use the chat function? Otherwise, I'm happy to, we'll start to walk through some of the key points of the plan. And just so you're aware, on the Engage Whitehorse platform, on the right-hand side, there's a document section. There are links to, other engagement events. I think most of them are now concluded, but you'll see there's under documents, you'll see a draft version of the plan. Okay, I'll move ahead with bringing up the plan. So, okay, this is the draft plan as it stands now. The purpose of this cycle of public review and the survey is to understand are there additional areas of concern, but again balancing that with the recognition that this is a first climate action plan from the city of Whitehorse, and there's a strong focus on corporately what's the city is in control of, and we recognize again in future iterations the landscape, regulatory and otherwise, whether it be federal government, territorial government, or the city, there will be changes, and that will determine how this plan will respond and react. So of course, if there are changes in politics, changes in just regulatory requirements, in funding requirements, that will start to influence this plan. But the focus right now is that which is directly within the control of the city. So, there's a question or comment. With regards to, thank you. Oh, thanks, Brian. I see the link dropped in the chat there about a climate action plan. So you had the climate change adaptation plan, but specifically as it relates to when we talk about a climate action plan, we're talking about both of the spheres of adaptation and mitigation. So this climate mitigation work and the inventory of greenhouse gas emissions is the first time that the city is doing that in a kind of all-inclusive package. So that's this is the first time getting that GHG information. Thank you for dropping that context in. So I'm going to just jump to some of the key graphics that are pertinent and helpful, but to orient first, the table of contents, always useful in any report or plan. So provide an introduction to kind of, again, some of the drivers for this work, as well as the scope. Most of that information, or all of that information, I've covered in the presentation so far. There's a bit more context, of course, there. The purpose or the objective of this plan, what we've heard to date, the actual greenhouse gas inventory, which has informed more of the measures and actions as they relate to mitigation as opposed to adaptation. And then section 4 looks at a pathway to carbon or net zero by 2050. So looking at the agreement or goal from the city to achieve that. So what would that take in terms of community carbon budget? There's then an implementation guide giving you a context on the actual pillars themselves, as well as the associated strategies and then the actions therein. not in this plan right now is the implementation framework and further details. So that'll be something that once this round of engagement concludes, more information will be provided on. That will be fleshed out further, essentially. So what I would like to do, so diagram of note. So this is again an example for the caption here, but just point out when we're thinking about greenhouse gas emissions for Whitehorse, this plan is only looking at the next 5 years. So it's looking to what can be accomplished in the next 5 years, taking us forward to 2030, recognizing that for the plan, in order for it to get 2050 net zero, would require essentially, that's what the blue portion here represents, is essentially extracting carbon or aiding in the reversal of emissions. So this plan is only focused on the next 5 years, which is focused on reduction. It doesn't start to move into that future state of, okay, we need to act faster, recognizing there's only so much that can be done through energy efficiency measures and such, and recognizing again, especially in the northern context, the circumstance that Whitehorse finds itself within, which is that much of the action will be undertaken by territorial governments, and Whitehorse will respond appropriately. I've walked through this already in the presentation. The other thing to note is, of course, that the adaptation measures, so recognizing that time is needed to prepare, whether that be harden infrastructure or develop nature-based solutions to respond to climate change. So the adaptation side, takes time, years, if not decades, to actually adequately prepare for that. So the actions taken today, there will be years and years before the benefits of those actions are seen in terms of protecting assets and increasing resiliency. So recognizing that there's a threshold that we have for resilience, and that can increase when we increase our adaptation actions. So that essentially extends our coping range, and that's what this graphic is depicting. Second, the other is you'll find here on page 10 an overview. This relates more so to the climate vulnerability assessment and projections for the city of Whitehorse. This is historical and projected climate data looking into the 2050s and the 2080s. So these are 30-year timeframes that climate data is evaluated within 30-year buckets. And so that will give you an indication of the climate parameters that we are looking at and the change that Whitehorse can expect. And that's based on the best available climate science today. And that science will, of course, change and need to be updated as IPCC, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, releases new data. Vulnerability assessment highlights based on vulnerability being a function of adaptive capacity and sensitivity, highlights infrastructure, whether owned or used by the city of Whitehorse, that is highly vulnerable. I think folks saw an example of that at webinar number 1, so not too surprising a list, and the escarpment obviously features on that. We talked about the scope of the plan and its focus being really on majority on the corporate actions and what's in control. Of course, there's much background work on existing plans, actions, strategies, and such that Whitehorse has undertaken. So trying to bring all of those threads together on existing work. A climate action plan is in many ways looking to bring all of those pieces together cohesively so that there's a better understanding of how these various engagements and opportunities that are already underway can support the climate action plan. Overview of the timeline and process in a bit more detail. And then, information on the energy and greenhouse gas emissions, again, corporate, and then community. So community expanding to include everything within the city limits that the city owns or operates, or this would include then residential. And so you've got, there's a function of everything within the city limits. So something that's tracked, but there's less direct ability to control some of that. So an example of that would be, individuals' homes and energy efficiency measures. The city has certain bylaws at its within its control, but ultimately, building code and decisions around many of those measures lie with territorial government. I'm going to move ahead to, just mindful of time. another iteration of the community carbon budget. So we'll look at what needs to be done in order to move forward with the carbon budget and what would need to happen, looking at inflection points around 2040 for emissions reduction. But much of this, as noted in the commentary here and structure, will change in the coming years as globally our emissions change and as our science needs to be updated. I've already given you an overview of the structure. And so I just want to walk you through quickly the implementation guide. So the actions have been identified or classified based on their potential to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. Co-benefits when we consider other priority areas of focus for the city, so equity, supporting jobs and prosperity, health and well-being. Then the department's needs, which will be completed after the engagement is closed. Timelines, so is this something that's underway, short-term or longer term? And then financial resources. So yeah, this is then structured by the 7 pillars with a goal under each pillar, the various strategies, and then the composite actions that support each of those strategies. I gather if you've made your way to the Engage Whitehorse website and to this webinar, you've likely already looked at this plan. So I'm going to, at this point, just to identify from a process perspective, after tonight and when the survey closes, feedback will then be reviewed and considered as part of the final edits, again, with that scope and context of what's within the control of the city, and further documented in appendices. So council can consider that in context, and then it'll be presented to council in early July. So that's it for the presentation portion. Happy to revisit any materials I showed and open the floor to discussion, whether that's verbally or through chat or Blake, before I see someone's typing a question or comments, is there anything you want to add from context perspective? See.
I think not really. I think the only thing I'd just say is we're doing the engagement at this point to get a sense of if there are any red flags that people see with aspects of in particular the strategies under the pillars, but also if people feel that there's things that are missing, we're definitely looking to hear on that as well too. But yeah, as far as the webinar goes, this is being done as a walkthrough to kind of go over any details that people want to kind of understand a bit better, or if people have questions about methodology or different aspects of the plan. Basically anything that people want to ask, feel free. The other thing I'd say too is that the timeline right now is that we're from the engagement period is going to run until May 31st. So that's when the survey will close as well too. We will be taking feedback at that point, and using it to further refine the plan before it's presented to council in late June, early July. So that is more or less the timeline at this point. And as Shane said earlier, if people have any input that they'd like to add, if they'd like to meet, if they'd like to just have a conversation about the plan, feel free to reach out to me. My email there. Happy to chat. Groups, individuals, whatever. Basically any time about the plan. I think that's pretty much all for me, Shane.
Thanks, Blake. Just a question or yet to respond to that, Blake, about council follow through.
Plan outlined here, and that the plan influences future decision making. It's just sort of good faith. Yeah. No, that's a good question, Kate. The what I'd say is that it is so climate action is it's a priority of this council. So the council has listed its priorities out on the on its website, and so climate action is one of the priorities, and so this plan has come from that and from the climate emergency that was declared in 2019. So it's a once it's approved by our council. I realize that there's an election later on this year in the fall, so it's probably, I imagine that's probably what you're referring to. But when city council has approved a plan, it does give marching orders to to city operations to actually start moving in accordance with that plan. So I know there are things that are going to be taking place in real time. Obviously, there's budgeting considerations, there's priority setting within the plan. But in terms of the plan in general, it is once it's approved, it does provide that emphasis, that direction that city departments do follow. So one such example, what I'll reference, is the sustainability plan from 2015. While that is in need of some updates, the fact that it was approved by the council of the day, it still has impact with city operations today. It's one of it provides lenses for capital planning committee to, when they pick capital planning projects, one of the criteria, one of the points, some of the points that are provided are done so based on how much it aligns with the sustainability plan. So again, that was just an example from 9 years ago, but it does kind of indicate the staying power of a plan once it's in place. So.
It's Blake. I know we just had somebody join. Just I'll note that we've concluded the presentation portion, but we're just opening the floor now to questions on the plan itself and directing folks to the engagement period, which closes for this round on Friday, the 31st of May. And this is the last engagement period on this plan. So that's through the survey, or if there are additional questions that kind of extend beyond what's asked there, you can follow up with Blake Rogers, who's the city representative for this project.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for thanks, Shane. Oh, I think you got a question from Brian.
Yeah, Brian.
Hey, yeah, so I'm not clear. Are you wanting feedback right now, or is it best just to go through these platforms that are provided in the slide here?
It's best if you're providing input, best to go through the platforms provided on screen. If you want, I guess, output, meaning, questions answered right now, clarifications on the plan or context, that can be addressed in this webinar.
Right, okay, thank you.
Anyone else? Then feel free to, if you feel more comfortable, dropping questions in the chat or unmuting. Another question is in progress in the chat.
Shane, maybe I'll just ask a question. Go, sorry. So surprised about the fact that cars contributions so much to emissions in Whitehorse. Was this a new finding? If so, did it surprise anyone on the team? So Shane, maybe did you want to take that one?
Yeah. I will note that for the information cap as it relates to the greenhouse gas emissions inventory, so here we can see, transportation. The information right now, recognizing that, there are limitations with accessing data, the quality of data, and we see that across Canada, and it's especially pronounced in northern communities. So trying to get quality data to understand emissions from vehicles, fleet, etc., and records of public vehicles and such, that there are many assumptions and limitations on that data, and that'll be refined with further iterations. So some of that surprise in that sense might come from the fact that those numbers are kind of guidelines, there are assumptions underpinning them, and where there are gaps in that data, other baseline data is used as a proxy. But yeah, recognizing as well that a big contributor there is airplane emissions. But I think you were saying specifically about, is your question specifically on cars or more generally on transportation, or?
It looks like it's about cars.
Cars, yeah. Just noting. Yeah, because we drew out specifically aviation about 4%, off-road transportation. Okay. Yeah, recognizing the large distances, and as I said, the assumptions and limitations of availability of data, and that will be revised as there are further plans, and that's actually something that the city is considering, is a community emissions inventory that will go into greater depth to understand that sort of information. But yeah, that's the best data that we have now.
There's another question that just was input by Brian.
So yeah, can you share your sources for the emissions data, and/or have you worked with Yukon government on the emissions inventory? So with the we can share, but to answer your first question, that'll be part of the appendix that'll supplement this report. So the inventory that was carried out and all of that information. Again, on the follow question, and/or have you worked with Yukon government? Yes, and there are limitations in the available data and accessing data. And so that's something that we experienced and have experienced as part of this and other projects, that getting information in a timely manner from other levels of government can lead to the need to use assumptions and other proxy data.
Shane, if I may, maybe if I could just put a question to you that's been raised a few times by others as well too, and that's when designing a plan like this, and I know Stantec has a lot of experience in designing these kinds of plans. How do you stay current with trends as they're evolving? So with climate science, the goalposts are changing, seem to be changing a lot. So what how would you I guess answer that question in terms of the work that Stantec does on a plan like this?
So say relating to each side of this equation on the greenhouse gas emissions reduction, it's a well-established field, and so there are strong regulatory structures and frameworks in place that allow for even this breakdown of what falls on each side of this, what's corporate versus community. So there are well-established existing regulations that determine how these things are reported, the proxy data that one is to use if specific data isn't available, meaning hasn't been measured, which is the case for many communities. And so that is something that this project has gleaned from many plans before it, and the fact that these are established regulatory frameworks that either come from federal level, territorial, that Whitehorse responds to, and so that's also will be influenced by funding that becomes available. So historically, governments have realized that this is work that their communities need to carry out. So territorial government will then allocate funding and say, okay, we're opening a round of funding for communities to carry out these emissions inventories. So that really helps progress the market and the industry in that regard. On the adaptation side, recognizing, yes, there are huge changes to kind of our emissions projections, as well as then the associated, degrees warming associated with that, and that varies depending on where you are in the world and in Canada. That is typically on a 4-year cycle that data is kind of batched and then can be downscaled to the specific areas. So right now we're on what's called Assessment Report 6, and that data came out about 2.5 years ago now, and so that's what we're currently working off of and used for this project. So that's where the actual climate change projections came from. And I think through another channel we heard that there was a question around 1.5 degree warming kind of has been reached, and yes, that has been reached for a continuous year now, but also recognizing there are lots of deviations in our temperature historic records and projections. So yes, that's 1 year, but then on a 30-year average, which is the time scale that we look at climate, the IPCC and Paris Accord and all of the commitments there are about keeping below 1.5 degrees, in that 30-year time horizon, as opposed to in any 1 year. So that data works on refreshed on a 4-year cycle.
Thanks for that. Any other questions that people might have about the plan, or about about any details that additional clarity, or just any any questions about the process in general? Either Shane or I can tackle them.
Is there a specific pillar in the plan that anyone wants to discuss?
If not, that's okay too. If things maybe percolate after this after this webinar, feel free to reach out to me anytime. Happy to field questions or relay them to Shane if they're of a technical nature, and get back to you with answers. But yeah, happy to answer anything now. I guess maybe just while we're waiting, if there are others, Shane, oh, wait a minute.
When developing the plan, were the recommendations of the Yukon Climate Leadership Council or Yukon First Nations Climate Action Fellowship considered? Can I hand to you, Blake, on
I'm happy.
engagement?
Yeah, I can answer that. So I have been in touch with the Yukon so the Climate Leadership Council, and I will be meeting with them on Tuesday. So I'll be attending their weekly meeting, and so being able to get feedback directly from them at that time. I have reviewed the connection, the reconnect document online, and done a walkthrough, and relayed my findings, my understanding to both Shane and internally to my colleagues as well too. But I am very much looking forward to the conversation with the Climate Fellowship. We've been back and forth in communication since the fall, and so looking forward to having a chance to connect next week.
Is there anything, if it's not a specific pillar, is there anything that surprised anyone within the plan, either in kind of the background analysis piece, noting the comments already, or in the actual actions that have been developed already, recognizing this needs, and balancing this is the first comprehensive action plan, as well as the need to balance what's within the control of the city? Is there any actions or suggestions you have, or something you felt was missing? Yeah. As I said, if there are, we'll be staying online till 8 p.m. But if there are specific questions that you want to elaborate on beyond that in the survey, or there's a question occurs to you after this for clarity, you can reach out to Blake. The engagement period for this will close next Friday, the 31st of May. And then we'll be incorporating, reviewing edits and the various pieces of engagement. Like mentioned, there's additional kind of targeted engagement going on with various youth groups, university and councils or committees. So that'll also be considered. Another question coming in the chat, maybe. Very welcome.
Thanks, Brian.
Thanks, Kimberly. Most welcome.
Thanks, Kim. Thanks, Linda, Kate as well too. Yeah, thank you to all of you for taking the time to connect tonight. We appreciate it. Shane, maybe just one more. I got one more question just from your perspective. Do you in terms of mitigation and adaptation, have you seen in municipal plans in recent years, have you seen any kind of new trends emerging, I guess, in terms of the approaches to address both of those things?
I would say, trends definitely in years of influence on procurement. So I think recognizing that what's within control, and people might think, okay, well, we're only purchasing, say, certain supplies or services. It's starting to wrap various considerations into procurement processes, recognizing that there are downstream effects related to how the city purchases. So that's something I think we're starting to see more consistently. The other thing that we're seeing is federal funding and territorial funding, but I'd say more so federal funding. There's far more money now becoming available to support communities, not just with the actual development of a climate action plan. It's as to the actual kind of hard built infrastructure or work related to the implementation of plans. So there's been a funding shift from just planning towards the actual implementation portion. So that's been a big change and driver, and I think more of that money is going to become available, recognizing that federal government recognizes it's either paying for it through insurance and rebuilding efforts, or it's proactive dollars spent.
Thanks for that. I realize we just had so Scott just joined us. Scott, welcome to the webinar. Thanks for joining. If you have any questions, we're nearing the end of the webinar, but if you have any questions about the draft action plan or any points of clarification that you'd like, please feel free to put a question in the chat or just let us know directly. There's a pretty small group tonight, so feel free to fire away if you have any questions.
Or if you want us to pick up on any point with the time remaining, just there's an overview of what we covered, a brief presentation with some context for the plan, and then we walk through the document itself, and we spent the last 25 minutes or so just discussing some specific aspects. So if you want to unmute, or if you want to drop questions in the chat, or the other thing I'll note is that, the engagement for this round finishes on at midnight on Friday, the 31st of May. The key input platform is through the survey on Engage Whitehorse. If there are any questions or feedback that kind of extend beyond that survey, or points of clarification required, that's the purpose of tonight, and can also be sought by contacting Blake, who's the city representative.
Any other points that you wanted to make, Shane? Oh, okay.
Thanks, Scott.
Yeah.
No, I think the key points that we touched on are, recognizing that this plan, it makes a plan for the next 5 years. I was going to say on, I think a key point I would like to reiterate in this plan is that this kind of last paragraph here. So although this climate action plan, there are specific actions within it related to strategies, these will be prioritized when the plan is presented to council, but also realistically, these things will be implemented and reprioritized, on an opportunistic basis, meaning, is there funding suddenly available? Is there another, climate event or extreme weather event that occurs this year or this summer in Whitehorse that suddenly, allows access to additional funding or drives, a political change that motivates action in a specific area? So this plan will, of course, be responsive to those internal and external pressures. The new council that will be elected in Whitehorse, that will, have a say as well as the community on, the actions and the direction of this plan and where priority might go. As I said, funding will also influence that. Kind of the convergence or completion of other plans. We know that this report recognized there's a lot of existing work that's underway. So kind of that perfect confluence of, well, if these bylaws are being reviewed and there's consideration of other measures in the city, that'll provide opportunities to highlight and prioritize other actions. So that's something that recognizing, climate action plans specifically, they are a plan and they're one that needs to be by nature of its work, very responsive to the natural environment as well as political, social, economic, and technological environment.
Thanks for that. I guess maybe one other question, just since we've got a few minutes here, but in doing the, obviously, the Stantec team has been working on this for since the fall, doing background research on for the plan, and I'm just wondering what are some of the things that have kind of stood out about Whitehorse's kind of some unique aspects about Whitehorse and about the nature of this plan that is kind of, I guess, again, stands out a little bit from some of the other plans that you've had experience working with.
I'll give an example on each side. So recognizing on the adaptation and generally on climate change and trends, just the rate of warming in Whitehorse and what that means in terms of changes. So you can see here when we consider annual mean temperature, which sometimes can be kind of bit too general for folks, myself included, to really grasp what does that mean in terms of a change when it's an annual mean. But when you consider, these changes from historic moving forward about number of days with extreme temperature greater than 30 degrees Celsius, I think that's surprising given what we see, on other work that we do with kind of at lower latitudes. And so when you consider what that means as well for the north and how it'll affect activities, whether those be cultural activities, winter sports and such. You can see here the number of days with a minimum temperature colder than -30. What might that mean for growing days and frost-free seasons? So there are opportunities here, but there's, of course, winter sports are a very special part of Northern life and the city of Whitehorse and its identity. So I think that's the one that is really hammered home through this work. Because there's kind of a big jump from kind of lower mainland or parts of southern Canada and then northern communities, and that huge jump in the rate of warming being twice that of the national average. So that's concerning and was newer for us. The other is on the what's within the city's control, just recognizing, depending on the community you work with. Try and bring up a larger image so folks can see it more clearly. Recognizing how Whitehorse, hands are very much tied when you consider the provision of various services and how they fall to the territorial government, and how Whitehorse, that's the most populous city in the north, is very much reliant on the Yukon government for direction and progress on. So I think the big topic that came up in earlier rounds was, electric vehicle charging. Well, that's something that the city alone can't take on, and can't deal with the resources and the network and infrastructure required to deal with that. You have, Yukon Energy and other players, transportation and such. So that's just a reality of the territorial or the layers of government that you're dealing with.
Thanks, Shane. And I think we're coming up to time, but maybe we'll just do one last call out for any questions that people may have. If people did want to ask, I guess AMA, ask Shane anything. Yeah, feel free to put something in the chat or ask now, or like I said, if there's something that comes to mind a bit later, please feel free to reach out, or this is best bet is to just email me directly, and either I can answer the question or get some insights from Shane. The other thing I guess I'd just say is just if you have anyone who is really interested in the plan and wants to engage, please point them my way as well too. I'm happy to connect. But yeah, I guess I'd just say thanks everyone for coming out again tonight. Appreciate all the time that you spent with us, and thanks Shane for the presentation.
Most welcome. And yeah, again, thank you everybody. It's means a lot to take time out of your busy evenings as summer kicks off, to take time to contribute to this climate action plan. Appreciate it. I will stop sharing my screen. I'll just drop the survey link in the chat as well as your email address, Blake, for anyone, and stop recording.
Perfect.